welcome to Finextra. I'm Hannah Wallace, and with me today is Andrew Kouloumbrides of Xceptor and Bruce Laing of Baringa to talk about the interbank lending rate. Hello to the both of you. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bruce, coming to you first. To set the scene for us, could you explain the industry challenge around the IBOR transition?
Financial institutions have a number of products that reference the existing IBOR rates, from derivatives to syndicated loans, bilateral loans with big institutions, through to mortgages, credit cards and student loans with people like ourselves. Over the next 2 to 3 years, these interbank offer rates, or LIBOR, are going to become less relevant, and banks and their clients need to understand how their transition from IBOR to the alternative reference rates is going to work.
All right, and what have financial service organisations done so far to address this challenge?
To date, financial organisations have focused on setting up a governance structure to manage LIBOR, appointing a senior person who will be ultimately responsible for LIBOR transition over the next 3 years. A lot of banks have done their impact assessment to understand what the exposure is to the existing LIBOR rates. And finally, I think towards the back end of last year, understanding how much budget they should set aside for both this year and the next 2 years to be able to transition from IBOR to the alternate reference rates in the future.
And following on from that then, what's happening next and when?
There are 2 things that financial institutions should do immediately if they haven't done so already. The first is to set up their legal contracts so that any new trades and transactions have appropriate fallback language. The second is to make sure that the sales, the front office teams, product control, ops, all set up to be able to handle the new transactions that reference the alternative reference rates. So SOFR, SONIA, etc. Banks need to make sure that they are capable of handling these types of transactions in the very short term. In the medium term, I think there are 3 things that banks need to think about. 1, how do they on an ongoing basis monitor a reduced exposure to LIBOR and an increased exposure to the new rates? The second thing is go deeper into their front-to-back analysis. Make sure that they understand exactly where the systems, the processes, the data and the people need to change to be able to deal with new types of transactions. There's one last thing that we would recommend, and we think that this is the longest running part of any LIBOR program, and that is looking at their legacy legal contracts, going through them in detail and understanding exactly what they need to re-agree with their counterparts. Go through an entire repapering exercise, which is where we think technology can play a very big part in making that more effective and efficient.
And now, Andrew, coming to you, how would technology be key to solving these challenges?
Just picking up on what Bruce has said, I think there is the assessment of the legacy challenges and issues which financial organisations have. So I think if you look at sort of going back, particularly around some of the legacy contracts, there's a huge role for some of the artificial intelligence technologies to play in being able to actually analyse and assess those contracts to understand exposure and the key parameters that need to be considered, actually then moving on to the repapering exercise. And actually those contracts typically have been put in place using emails that have been unaudited, changes not tracked properly. And I think digitising that process and being able to actually pull in the new reference data that's required, as well as actually tracking the interaction between both internal parties and external parties in agreeing the new contracts is essential. And we see, if you look historically over the last few years, all the repapering that's been required out of MiFID, Brexit, even the initial margin agreements, credit support annexes, that's the key area where Xceptor can really play a part in actually digitising those processes, actually making them efficient but also auditable and being able to actually track them going forward.
Some really interesting developments ahead there. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your insights. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Hannah.
Thanks, Hannah.
And thank you for watching.